before we get started. First, CRL, Chalk River Laboratories, is located on the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. As an organization, CNL recognizes and appreciates their connection to this place. CNL also recognizes the contributions that First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and other Indigenous peoples have made, both in shaping and strengthening this community in particular, and this province and country as a whole. Today's webinar is to take you through the construction sequencing planning for the NSDF. We'll start with a presentation, and then we'll open the floor for a Q&A discussion period. A few housekeeping items before we start the presentation. There is simultaneous interpretation of this discussion. You can access the session in French and English through the globe icon on the bottom right bar of your screen. Select the language you would like to hear. There may be a slight lag if you choose the French option. Today's session is planned for about 1 hour. We anticipate the presentation to take about 30 minutes, and the rest of the time will be for Q&A. Please use the Q&A icon to submit your question, and at any point during the presentation, submit the question during the presentation at any time, and we will cover it at the end of the presentation. The Q&A icons are found at the bottom of your screen. Note that we will be recording these sessions and posting them on our YouTube channel afterwards. And if you have any issues, please get in touch with us at ermstakeholder@cnl.ca. We have team members watching the inbox, so we'll get you sorted out. Now, we'll introduce you to the first speaker of today, Steve Innes. He's the Deputy Vice President of Capital Projects. Before we bring you in, we do have a video, and it will play in English. And if anyone that's listening to simultaneous interpretation, you will hear the French. Both are posted to CNL's YouTube channel, and we will share the links following the webinar. Okay, so without further ado, Steve Innes.
Thanks very much, Mike. Appreciate it. Happy to be here today talking about the construction sequencing of the near surface disposal facility project. The slide up just talks on the series of webinars that have been going on to date. The majority of them have obviously focused around the design, the safety case, the engagement that we've been having with the public throughout the whole design and licensing process. And getting to today's where we're talking about construction sequencing. Now, I would like to note, and it's going to come up, that we're still going through our licensing process. We don't have approval to construct yet, but we are doing planning for that, and we'll talk a little bit about that today. Next slide, please. So just a bit of an update on where we are since the last time we spoke in a webinar or an event. We have gone through the CNSC Commission hearing process. The hearing was done in person between May 30th and June 3rd. That hearing was broken up into different days on different topics. We had one on environmental assessment, environmental protection. We had a day focused on the long-term safety case, obviously Indigenous consultation and engagement, and the requested license amendment. It was a very busy several days, lots of discussion, lots of interactions with the public. And I think for me, it certainly demonstrated the amount of engagement that's taken place, as well as the amount that the design and the plan of this project has been modified through those engagement activities. Obviously, from the hearing, the CNSC issued a procedural direction that's asked us to continue on engagement with the Kebewek and the Kitigan-Zibi Anishinaabe First Nations. We're doing that now. That process is expected to carry on through January, where we will submit an update to the CNSC Commission on how that engagement has gone. We look forward to it. We're actively continuing engagement on site right now, not only with the two First Nations groups that are mentioned in the procedural direction, but also with all the other First Nations groups that we've been interacting with throughout. Next slide, please. So just a bit of an update on the timeline and obvious changes that amount from that procedural direction. Obviously, that's underway now. We're optimistic that will close at the end of January when we submit an update on the engagement activities that we've done between now and then. Anticipating or optimistic, I guess, around a successful decision that the hearing can be completed and final submissions entered at the end of January. Really what that says is there's probably at best a decision around June 2023 or summertime. A decision, and if that is positive with an approval to construct at that time, that actually puts us right in the middle of migratory bird nesting season. So from construction start date and the topic of discussion today, that means really we don't start up and clear the forested land in that until September 2023. Next slide, please. So just roughly the project phases, and again, the topic of discussion today is really on the construction phase of the project. This is the period that'll take us from now really right through until fiscal years 28-29, when the construction is completed, although the construction's a 3-year time frame roughly for the sort of hard physical construction. There's a lot of steps we do in terms of inactive commissioning before returning for an approval to operate from the CNSC and entering an operational phase. So the operational phase, these are just indicative timelines. Takes us approximately 50 years until the waste is all placed in the ECM. 30 years then from decommissioning and closure. And then obviously the very long-term future of the facility is ultimately decommissioning of the facilities that are built, leaving just the ECM to maintain the waste placement. Just highlighting again, construction is conditional on a license approval from the CNSC. And with that, we've got a video queued up that will walk us through the construction sequencing a lot better than I can do in person. So let's go ahead and play the video, please.
Or NSDF, begins with the site location. A bedrock ridge that is 1.2 kilometers away from the Ottawa River provides protection as it is high enough to be well outside of a floodplain and carved into the slope in a forested area to minimize visibility. The NSDF site is approximately 37 hectares, 17 hectares of which will be the Engineered Containment Mound, or ECM. Following Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission approvals, we are proposing to start construction on the NSDF and expect it will take approximately 3 years to complete. Our construction period starts with enabling works. During this time, the site is cleared of trees, and a secure perimeter and a buffer zone are created. CNL is working with several Indigenous groups on a sustainable forest management plan to offset the deforestation. Dust, noise, and vibration management procedures and surface water management features are established to protect the adjacent swamp and woodland areas. Targeted blasting will be completed to remove rock down to the level of the baseliner. Blasted rock will be recycled for use in other on-site construction activities. Following the enabling works, we begin construction of the buildings, equalization tanks, and site services. At the same time, Phase 1 of the Engineered Containment Mound, which includes cells 1 to 6, the southern perimeter berm, and temporary haul road are built. Phase 2 of the Engineered Containment Mound is expected to be built 25 years after operations begin and will include construction of the final 4 disposal cells in the northern perimeter berm. Now let's take a closer look at the design and construction of the Engineered Containment Mound, which includes the berm, baseliner, and cover systems. First, we construct the perimeter berm, which forms the outside edge of the Engineered Containment Mound. It is constructed on stable bedrock from specially selected, free-draining, natural earthen materials that are designed to resist seismic forces and hold back the weight of the waste pushing against it. The liners of both the cover and baseliner systems are securely locked into place on top of the berm below the perimeter road. Next, we install the 13 layers of the baseliner system. Each of the individual layers has been designed and specifically sequenced to contain the waste, collect leachate, which is the water that has filtered down through the waste, and protect groundwater to ensure the long-term protection of the environment and human health. Working our way up through the layers of the baseliner system, we start at the lowest level, which is formed by the secondary composite liner. This layer consists of a compacted clay liner, synthetic clay liner, and a textured high-density polyethylene liner. By using alternating natural and synthetic layers, we will achieve maximum stability and impermeability for long-term protection of the environment. Next comes a sand cushion, a woven textile separator, and a layer of clear stone, which contains the leachate detection system and a pathway for the removal of any leachate that may have passed through the liner above. From the leachate detection layer, we move to the primary liner, consisting of a high-density polyethylene liner and a synthetic clay liner that work together to provide a strong barrier. Above that, a sand cushion separates and provides additional liner protection. Next, we find a woven textile separator and a layer of clear stone with pipes running along the valley of each cell. These perforated pipes collect and channel leachate to extraction sumps at the base of the berm from where it is pumped to the equalization tanks. In the top layers of the baseliner, we find textile and granular stone layers which protect the leachate collection system during waste placement activities. At completion of the 3-year construction period and a commissioning period, the NSDF will transition into an operations phase. Prior to commencing operations and any waste being received, CNL will apply for an operating license from the CNSC. As a first step in the operations phase, a weather cover will be installed over the active cell prior to waste placement activities commencing. The primary mission of the cover is to prevent precipitation from contacting the cell floor and placed waste. Only waste that meets CNL's waste acceptance criteria will be accepted for disposal, and all waste will be placed in accordance with the waste placement and compaction plan. CNL will prioritize waste prevention, reduction, and diversion to reduce the amount of waste that goes into the NSDF. Waste will be placed in small steps to maximize density and reduce empty space, minimizing the potential for future settlement. Once each cell is filled, an interim cover is placed to provide protection of the environment until the final cover is installed. The final cover is placed during the operational phase as cells reach capacity and are closed. It is made up of similar alternating layers of natural and synthetic materials which isolate the waste, provide radiation shielding, create a barrier to intrusion from plants and burrowing animals, and keeps precipitation from contacting the waste. Following closure of the last cells, the NSDF transitions from the 50-year operational period to a 30-year closure period. During the closure period, the focus moves from active waste placement towards long-term monitoring, maintenance, and preparation for at least 300 years of institutional control. 30 years may seem like a long time, but this period ensures the ECM reaches stabilized conditions and that site infrastructure is maintained and decommissioned in accordance with the closure plan. The environmental monitoring program, which includes groundwater and air quality testing, will ensure the cover system, baseliner, berm, and associated components all perform to expected levels before the NSDF enters the institutional control period. Through design, operations, and long-term monitoring, the NSDF project will significantly improve current and future waste management conditions at the Chalk River Laboratories site, providing safe, permanent waste disposal and enhanced environmental protection and stewardship.
Hey you. Yeah, you. I'm not a robot or artificial intelligence,
Perfect, thanks. If we can jump to the next slide, please. So just a quick look at some of the construction timeline dates as mentioned earlier and shown in the video. You know, assuming a successful outcome from the hearing process and a construction start next fall in September 2023, you would see activities moving through the field. The site clearing is demonstrated there. Construction of the wastewater treatment plant starting up spring 2024. Now the wastewater treatment plant and ancillary buildings get constructed at the same time that as the ECM, with the mass excavation and materials moving back and forth. I think an interesting note for this project from construction, like none of these buildings, facilities are overly complicated to construct on their own. The challenges within this facility or within this project is really the logistics and movement of soils and aggregates through our site, as we've described previously, and stated numbers in our EIS. You know, the overall material movements represent approximately 2 million meters cubed of aggregates, with removals in roughly 900,000 meters cubed between overburden, topsoil, blast rock, and then the import of 1.1 million cubic meters of aggregates to build the ECM and all the layers of the base containment system that were described in the video. So that does take some time, obviously. So, you know, the 3-year construction timeline in active commissioning and testing, which takes place for basically a year, and ultimately approaching the CNSC with a request for an approval to operate the facility in 2028. From our approval to operations, we still have a bit of active commissioning and testing to do, and then starting up the waste placement within the facility. So with that, I think we're just about due to turn it over to questions. I would like to introduce Craig Cochran, who's on the call with me as well. Craig's definitely there for the phone a friend option for me. He's an environmental engineer, been with the NSDF project for quite some time, and an active member of our team working to support the construction and CNL's oversight role. So between Craig and I and the team here, we'll do our best to address any questions that anyone has. So Mike, maybe back over to you for the Q&A.
Yep, perfect. Okay, thanks, Steve. Okay, so just a reminder that questions can be submitted in the Q&A chat function, and we will answer them as they come in. As we wait, it's probably a good time to talk about our CAP program. So CNL's Community Advisory Panel is going on its second year, and it is accepting applications. For more information, please visit cnl.ca/cap or email our stakeholder relations team at ermstakeholder@cnl.ca. It's for local residents, and it's the Community Advisory Panel. Just wait a bit for questions to come in. And as you see on screen here, that is our email. We're also very active on our Facebook page, our Twitter handle. There's our NSDF page on cnl.ca. And we have a lot of great YouTube videos to check out. Seems to be a bit quiet, gentlemen. Our previous 2 webinars, we had a lot of questions. So if you have any, please put them in the chat function now. I'll just fill this time with...
Yeah, Mike, maybe I can also just touch on some of the interesting points as well around construction and reuse of materials and some of our sustainability initiatives that we we'll be working on with this project. A good example of what the site's trying to do from a reduce, reuse, and recycle perspective is management of soil. So the aggregates that we mentioned above, and I know some of this information has been spoken about in previous sessions, but I think it's good to highlight again. We're trying to make the best use of those materials within CNL and within our property. So we have a rigorous plan to manage the materials that are removed from the site, whether it be trees and what we're doing with those trees and some of the discussions with our First Nations communities around us, the separation and sort of screening of soils and reuse of soils within this project and with other projects on the site. And then even for the blast rock. So when we blast for the base liner system that we need, we actually have a plan to crush that and reuse that aggregate on the site. So activities like that help us avoid carbon emissions of trucking materials from long distances off-site for disposal, and then bringing them all back in. So a couple little interesting points in terms of how CNL is helping to sort of offset our carbon impacts of the project.
Okay, great. Thanks, Steve. We do have a question coming in, and it is for our stakeholder relations team. Are there any updates on the procedural direction from the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission? So I believe Margot, you'd like to take this one?
Sure. Thanks, Mike. And Steve, I'll let you fill in any blanks here. So I'm Margot. I'm a Senior Communications Officer with Canadian Nuclear Laboratories Environmental Remediation Management Stakeholder Relations Team. A very wordy name. And I believe yesterday there was an update that the CNSC shared. There was a notice, so we can post that in the chat. And Steve, is there anything that we can share, any additional information that was shared with that notice that you'd like to touch on?
I don't think anything's changed out of that from the timelines, Margot, that we're on, and certainly a reminder for us to continue with the work we're doing with both Kebuek and again Zibi and Anishinaabe First Nations. As I kind of mentioned before, those activities are underway, and from my perspective, in them some really positive interactions with some really eager and engaged people to both understand the project here, as well as provide an opportunity for us to learn from them too, as we walk the sites and discuss different topics within those areas.
Perfect. And I know Rachel's got it up in the chat, the link to the notice as well, so people can read it further for themselves. Sorry, Mike, back to you.
Okay, thank you, Margot. So we do have a question about any other location scouted for the deep geologic repository, but that is not on us to answer. I believe that's the NWMO, but
yeah, Margot, again, I can add something to that as well. Yes, you're talking about the Nuclear Waste Management Organizations, the NWMO's project to find a site for a deep geological repository, and that's part of their mandate to find the long-term solution to all of Canada's spent nuclear fuel or high-level waste. And we'll provide a link to the NWMO's website and how to get in touch with that organization. Is there anybody else that would like to add to that, Steve? Or
no, nothing else, Margot. Thanks.
And so I see another question there from Sarah. Okay, that is not in partnership with the CNL. So the NWMO, it shares it more on their website. but they have the mandate for all organizations in Canada, so not just CNL, but any producer of, or owner rather, of high level waste has, and it's through the government as well. And they have the government mandate to find that long-term solution. So it's not, I don't know if I described it as a third party hire. I'll direct you to their website for the language that shares that.
Okay, great. Thank you, Margot. I'll just see if there's any more coming in. So this webinar is being recorded, and we'll post once we post this recording to YouTube. We will send it out. We will send the link out, and feel free to distribute it to anyone who might have missed today's webinar or anyone who might be interested. You can always ask us questions after the fact, even after we're done this, at any time, ermstakeholder@cnl.ca. Okay, so we do have one coming in. What happens to construction if something archaeologically significant comes up?
Sure. Great question. Thanks for that, Mike. And before I go over to Craig to help with some of the specifics and examples of exactly what we do, that this is something that we are prepared for, and we have done a number of archaeological test pits within the site already to understand if this is a major risk or a concern to the project. But obviously, you don't know what you don't know for areas that are covered in the forest now, and we haven't begun excavation on. So, Craig, do you want to just touch on what the process is when and if we discover something during our excavation?
Yep, for sure, Steve. And I guess just to kind of reiterate, we kind of consider everything to be a low risk because Chalk River is a well-studied site, and we've done a number of archaeological assessments over the years for this project and to support other waste management areas, other new builds. So it's a well documented site, but we are aware that there are areas of archaeological significance on Chalk River and nearby the NSDF site. So that risk does come up in construction. What we do when we encounter something, it's a stop work condition. So if we find something that's out of place, even if it's just suspect to be of archaeological significance, that's a stop work and then call in the experts. And based on when those experts come in and they assess what it is, whether it be something like there's old households around, if it's an old teapot, maybe that's something that we just catalog, put to the side, and continue construction. But if something more significant is found, be it a grave site, First Nations artifacts, those type of things, they'll take a much longer time to resolve. You'll have to go out and engage the various communities and impacted SMEs, subject matter experts, to come up with that appropriate resolution. There's no one size fits all that you do when it comes to archaeology. It's a risk that kind of happens in construction, not just at Chalk River, but anywhere. But there is kind of an established process. You stop work, you assess it, you call in the experts, and you determine the proper path forward before we continue on with construction.
Thanks, Craig.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Craig and Steve. During the construction phase, how many truckloads will be required to transport all the components of the baseliner and the cover?
Good question. I don't know if we've calculated it in truckloads. Craig, do we have that one? We can probably convert it pretty easily, but not on the spot because we don't want to test my math like that.
Yeah, we've definitely done that before, Steve. It's tough to come up with a good number because we're not using one particular size of truck. I guess the rule of thumb, if you kind of say 1 million cubic meters out and 1 million cubic meters in, and pretty well divide by 2 and remove a 0, and that would say 100,000 truckloads out and 100,000 truckloads in. You know, that's going to vary. That's going to be phased over a long kind of, you know, a few more trucks for topsoil than for blast rock than for soil, but it's tough to really pin it down to a number of truckloads. But yeah, that's without making a fool of myself, I couldn't tell you a number on this one.
Okay, so it was an anonymous attendee who asked that. So if we could get your if you could send us your email, we can send you any follow-up information we have on that topic. Be happy to get any information back to you. Okay, next one. Do I need to have a lot of background knowledge to participate in the CAP? So that could be to Rachel or Margot.
Hey, Mike, I can take that one. So, Rachel Chanette, I'm a communications officer with ERM Stakeholder Relations, and it's a good question. We do get this one a lot. So, no, you don't need any prior knowledge of CNL or CRL at Chalk River Laboratories to participate in the CAP. It's really for any interested member from the surrounding community who wants to learn more and is interested in helping us kind of shape how we talk about the cleanup of the Chalk River site. So you can always email us at ermstakeholder@cnl.ca to learn more, or visit our website, cnl.ca/CAP. Thanks, Mike.
Okay, great. Thank you, Margot. Or Marco. Thank you, Rachel. What was the site selected for the NSDF?
Sorry, Mike, how was the site selected for the NSDF?
Yeah, how did CNL come up with where we are proposing to put the NSDF?
Sure. Thanks for that. There's and I'll go to Craig to also help with the history of this and the detailed studies that took place. But a lot of effort went into determining the best location on the site with studies of our groundwater, studies of geotechnical studies of the bedrock and the soils to support the structural integrity of the facility. But primarily that flow of groundwater on the property. So, Craig, did you want to touch on a little bit on the history of the location?
Yeah, Steve, I can just in high level terms. I'm certainly not the expert, just one small piece in that whole process. But the site selection process back in 2016, 2017, around that time frame, they assessed the sites based on a lot of factors, some social factors, some economic factors, and then the technical factors like groundwater and you know, distance to travel, some of the risks with, you know, most of the waste being on the Chalk River site versus moving it somewhere else. So all of these little bits and pieces kind of come together, get ranked, and several sites get selected, and then they're further refined until a preferred site is chosen. And that's sort of the process that we went through to determine the site that's there. Our big selling features are the groundwater flow and the surface water flow, certainly, for a landfill site or a waste disposal site. But also a lot of the conversations had, the waste is at Chalk River, a large quantity of it, 90 to 95% of the waste is in Chalk River already. Transportation was also a very big factor, and certainly those are the two that I'm familiar with, but there's a lot more built into it, and in some of our documents that are posted publicly, the environmental impact statement and the project description go through that in a lot more detail.
Perfect. Thank you, Craig. So back to a truckload question, but can we measure truckloads along Plant Road versus truckloads we're expecting off of Plant Road?
So we do have that information in our assessments. I don't have it at my fingertips though, Mike. So this is probably one we can follow up with a response in the Q&A after this. So they're good follow-up question to clarify the difference, because there are a lot of different truck movements on site. As I mentioned previously, in terms of reuse of our materials, a lot of the material movements happen within our site specifically, and then we're also working to maximize the reuse of that bedrock by blasting it, processing it, crushing it on the existing footprint, which allows us to reuse it for things like the roadways within the facility, like foundations and backfill for the ancillary buildings, the wastewater treatment plant, all that sort of thing, which really focuses on minimizing the truck traffic down the plant road and into site, and really the logistics of shipping materials from the various quarry and locations that they come from. But we do have some details on that, so I think we can certainly take that away and provide a response to that.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Steve. So yeah, we'll get Margot to message if we can. If you can talk to the anonymous person, I'm not sure. If not, can you please send your email in the Q&A chat, or send your email to ERM stakeholder, and we can get all the information to you. We just got to find out who you are. Okay, so seems like the questions have slowed down, but I will just quickly before we wrap up, that to remind people about our community advisory panel again. It's a great way to stay in touch and get all the latest from our projects. cnl.ca/CAP, or you can email us at ermstakeholder@cnl.ca. Yes, and when we do send you the link for this webinar, we will include answers to everybody. I forgot to mention that. Looking forward to sending any of those answers out to you. And that should be about it for this webinar. I'd like to thank everybody for attending. Craig and Steve, thank you for doing this today. And again, one more time, like a broken record, if you have any additional questions at all, you can always ask us at ermstakeholder@cnl.ca. So we will end it from there. Thank you for attending. And again, thanks, Steve and Craig, and ERM stakeholder team. Have a nice day.
Thanks, everyone.